So I was just on a video yesterday talking about how apparently with an Xbox, they're trying to figure out a way to get a new Fallout game out of the door in light of the TV show and all the success around Fallout right now. And then literally today, the man himself, Todd Howard, gets on an interview with Kinda Funny Games, and I'll link that in the description below, and he starts teasing stuff. He potentially teases 2 unannounced Fallout projects in addition to stuff for 76 and Starfield and more. So we need to talk about it. Like, it's actually insane that Todd Howard decides to randomly do this out of nowhere. It's one thing to have a rumor or a leak or inside info, but to have the head of BGS himself teasing stuff for the future is just insane. We need to cover everything that he said. Hopefully you enjoy my breakdown of that interview. Again, if you want to check it out for yourself, it's linked in the description below. But if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe if you're new, with notifications if that's possible. But let's get right into the video. This interview covered a lot of different topics, right? They talk about the Fallout TV show and how involved Todd was, how it was like on set and all that kind of stuff. But then he's asked about the question of retirement, and specifically, how much is that on your mind right now? How much are you thinking about the timeline and how much you have left or want to do? In that moment, Todd confirms that he's 53, so he's absolutely not old. Like, 53 is not old by any means. But he does say he doesn't ever want to stop. It's just too much fun. He loves the work and products. If he didn't make these games, he'd just be playing them all the time. But he does admit that the games at BGS do take a long time to make, right? One of the things that we're focused on here is obviously making sure they're the highest quality, but also finding ways to increase our output. We don't want to wait that long either, right? It's never our plan, but we want to make sure we get it right. And so my hope is to do it as long as possible. I have no plans of retiring or anything like that. I really am glad that Todd doesn't have any plans of retiring. I like Todd. I genuinely do. Like, I think he's a stand-up guy, and in every interview that he's done, in every video he's done, he always seems as honest and sincere as he possibly can be, of course within the confines of a big company like Bethesda and now Xbox, right? Just listen to what he says and how he speaks in this interview. He's sincere, and he clearly has a lot of love and passion for what he does, especially with the games he works on and the IP he deals with. He's very passionate about his work, and yeah, even he admits they don't always get things right at BGS, right? Look at 76 and its launch, and they talk about that in this interview too. Look at Starfield and how polarizing it was and some of the things they left out when it comes to city maps and whatnot. They don't always get things right, but clearly he has a lot of love for this, clearly he has a lot of passion for this, and even though I don't think, BGS is necessarily going to be in a bad space when Todd eventually does decide to leave. There is a lot of unknowns when it comes to that, right? Who would take over, for Todd when he does decide to hang up the boots? Would it be someone within BGS? Would it be Ashley Chen? Would it be Emil? Would it be someone external? We don't know that. It's a big unknown. So even though I'm not necessarily worried, there is some uncertainty with how BGS might fare after Todd leaves and the direction they go in. So personally, I would prefer Todd to stay at BGS for the next 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, right? I don't know if that's going to be too old at that stage. But at minimum, I want to see him do Elder Scrolls 6, which we know he's doing, and Fallout 5. If he wants to retire after Fallout 5, Todd, you have my permission, you can do it. I'm obviously joking. But I would like to see him do Fallout 5, and if he wants to do a Starfield 2 after that, because again, Starfield seems to really be his passion project, then maybe that after that. But I just don't want him to retire anytime soon, and I certainly don't want Elder Scrolls 6 to be his last project. So it's good to hear that. And also as well, he keeps talking about how, yeah, we do take a long time to make stuff at BGS. However, they are trying to figure out ways to increase their output. And we're going to be talking about that more later on. So then he's asked the question, was there ever a moment in the lead up to the Fallout TV show where you're like, I wish we had a new game out? Even given the Fallout 4 Next Gen patch and 76, did you ever wish you could have had Fallout 5 or essentially a spin-off out alongside the show? And Todd says, not necessarily. First, he views it from a top-down perspective for the franchise. How healthy is the franchise? How relevant is Fallout to the world? And we're doing really well there. We have a whole team on 76, and so we've always been doing a lot of Fallout work. I think what's great about this moment is seeing all that work in 76, even though a lot of people understandably dismissed it from how it launched, seeing all that attention come to the game and people saying, oh, I'm really enjoying this as a Fallout experience. I think right now, it's the most people we've ever had in 76, seeing all that response in particular to 76 that hadn't had that level of success before. I'm super proud of the team who's been working on the game. But then he does say, we're always making plans. We kind of have 5 separate teams within the studio. We have people moving between Fallout and Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 and a mobile team, and then external projects and co-development we're doing like backports and taking games to other platforms that still have big audiences like Fallout 4, etc, etc. So I think Todd, if he could wave a wand and say, hey, we're going to have a new Fallout game come out alongside the show, absolutely he would do it. Absolutely he would. I think he was just confined with all the projects that they're doing and the capacity they've had. And they've always had this issue, right? They've always had this issue that they're not that big of a studio in the grand scheme of things, especially in the AAA space. BGS is still not that big compared to some other studios out there, especially the teams that work on Fortnite and whatnot, right? They're not that big and they've always had this capacity and resource issue. However, if he could have gotten a new game out for the show, I'm sure he would have, and he kind of touches on this later in the video, though he does say they're trying to figure out ways to increase their output. And from my perspective, one of the clear ways is, working with another studio. If they still want to do Starfield DLC and Elder Scrolls 6 and all these other projects that they're, potentially working on, then I think there's really no other way. If you want to get a fully fledged game out, you need to work with another studio. Though I do want to mention one thing. I know that in hindsight, it seems obvious that they should have had a new game coming out with a Fallout TV show. But did we really know how much of a success it would be? Did we really know how well received it was going to be received, right? Like, it was really a shot in the dark. It could have been a huge flop as much as it could have been a huge success. And yes, after the fact, we know it's been a huge success. So it's nice for us to look back in hindsight and say, well, they should have had a new game out. But what if the show was a flop, right? What if it was bad and they decided to release a new game alongside the show? Would that have reflected nicely or well onto the game? Probably not, right? And even though Todd clearly did a lot to try and make sure the show was set up for success, working with the right production studio and, putting stuff in place with the story and just taking care being on set and everything like that. Even though he did a lot to protect the franchise, still, there was every chance that it could have been a flop. It just so happened it wasn't a flop, and it seems like, they should have had a new game out, but it could have easily been a flop. So I understand why they didn't necessarily want to try and plan an expedited game to come out alongside the TV show, right? So in hindsight, yes, it's obvious, but looking forward like that in the past, maybe not so much. So then he's asked the question about, with Fallout having even more success and being even bigger than it's ever been, he was asked, do you sit there and think more about that co-development and external development, like letting people not make Fallout 5 necessarily, but a spin-off like a mobile game or a New Vegas? He says, in response, we've always had those conversations. We did a lot of things for the show. Though there isn't a big new game out, they did add content into 76 for the show. Not that much content, Todd, but yes, a little bit. It was a skin or two. And he also says that 76 has a great map expansion coming this summer with Skyline Valley, which is absolutely true. I've been playing that on the PTS. But then this is the key paragraph where he potentially teases those 2 unannounced Fallout projects. So we really need to analyze what he says in this instance. So this is what he says, quote, we look at what we're doing with the Fallout franchise, and then we say, do we still feel good about, I can't reveal it now, but here is our runway for Fallout as a franchise. When is Season 2 happening? What are we doing on mobile? What are we doing in Fallout 76? What are we doing with this thing? What are we doing with this other thing? And at this moment, he smirks. He definitely laughs, and we need to keep a note of that, right? And then he continues, and when are these landing? And again, if I could snap my fingers and have them all be out and ready, I would. But the main thing is, how do we deliver these at a high quality level? That is always most important. So I think there are 2 different ways you can take what Todd is saying here. First, you can say he's just being vague about it, right? He's being broad and speaking in a vague sense. What are we doing here? What are we doing there? He's not necessarily referring to specific projects that they're actually working on in the Fallout franchise. On the other hand, right, if you want to be, excited about it, maybe he is actually teasing 2 unannounced Fallout projects here. Because he was asked about the franchise and its future, and he's saying the future and the runway of the Fallout franchise, what are we doing with this thing? What are we doing with that thing? And in that moment, I need to stress, he laughs, he smirks. I think he's hiding something. I genuinely think he is. I think he's laughing because he's working on this cool secret project that no one knows about other than him and the team at BGS. And he's kind of laughing because he's mentioning that quite publicly in this interview, which he tends not to do when it comes to BGS stuff. I think he actually is referring to something that they're working on. I think he is talking about 2 unannounced Fallout projects, though that doesn't necessarily mean they're actually fully fledged games. And I think they're probably not. Maybe one of those is, but I can't imagine one of those is actually a game that they're working on. We keep talking about the capacity issues that BGS has. They're only a team of over 400 people or something like that, maybe 450. And if they're working on Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 and still 76 to some capacity, and their mobile games and whatever it might be, could they really be working on a brand new Fallout project right now? I think he's referring to something that's a lesser extent, right? But maybe they have actually reached out to someone like Obsidian or another developer within Microsoft or even an external developer, and maybe they've started the process of making a new Fallout game. I don't know. I'd like to be optimistic about it. I like to say that they're trying to do that in that regard. But also, as well, as I mentioned in my last video, apparently Xbox is making those plans as well. And Todd obviously would be in frequent contact with Xbox to let them know what we want to do, what their plans are, what our plans are. And maybe they're collaborating on this, right? So hopefully they are starting something. Hopefully this is about an actual fully fledged game. But even if it is 2 smaller minor projects that are just related to Fallout, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't necessarily be sad, but I wouldn't be surprised in that regard. But anyways, let's move on. They do talk about other topics. He's asked whether he feels vindicated about 76 because it is very popular right now. He talks about the connection between players and devs, talks about the importance of taking criticism on board. I really appreciated how he approached this section, and I encourage that you watch it. And then he's asked about Starfield. So he mentions shipbuilding, and he says we have an update coming. He thinks it's going to get announced in the next few days this week and also be up on Steam beta, which is pretty cool. And he says it has some great stuff in it for shipbuilding as well, though this is not Shattered Space. Shattered Space is releasing in the fall, so we actually know when the first proper DLC for Starfield is going to be coming. It's not anytime in the next few weeks, it's going to be sometime in the fall. Hopefully we get an actual date to work with sometime soon. But then he also says we have a really big update coming very soon for Starfield. There is a lot of stuff, but he does say we redid the maps, city maps are coming, thank the heavens. And he also goes on to say later that more gameplay options are coming to the game as well. Maybe he's referring to some sort of survival mode in that instance, I don't know. And then he says other display modes are coming to console, which people have asked for. They want to do all that stuff, it just takes some time, but they're excited about it. And then he's asked specifically about Shattered Space. Is it coming along nicely? And he says, yes it is, we're going to have some stuff to show, but he can't say more right now. So I know that everybody's attention and focus is on Fallout right now, and understandably, I'm included in that too. With the TV show and the Fallout 4 Next Gen update and 76's map expansion and the upcoming questline, it's understandable that everyone's focusing on Fallout right now. However, it's nice to hear that things on Starfield are actually moving along and they're progressing. They still have over 200 people working on Starfield, right? And Starfield still hasn't had its first DLC yet. At this time after launch, Fallout 4 had like 3 or 4 DLC out already, and Starfield still hasn't had that, let alone all of the features that they said would be coming to the game, like city maps, but also new ways of traveling and the mod kit and all that kind of stuff. We were literally a little bit in the dark when it came to Starfield because we hadn't heard much about it, with everyone talking about Fallout, including Todd Howard. So it's nice to know that they're still moving things along with Starfield. I do believe that Starfield still has potential. It still has room to grow. They just need to start updating it in a substantive way with content, not just bug fixes. It's now content that is important. So Shattered Space coming in autumn, right? Coming this fall. Really cool to hear. Nice to see that we're getting city maps. Should have been in the game much earlier, at launch even, but nice to hear. I really want to know what those other gameplay options are. Maybe it is a survival mode. That would be pretty cool. But I do believe we need to know more about those new ways of traveling. I think that's also key because they talked about it earlier this year. So why don't we know more about it? Why didn't he talk about it in this interview? Hopefully they haven't just dropped that idea entirely. But it's nice to see Starfield is still moving along. But let's talk about 76 now, because 76 potentially might be getting a key important gameplay feature that a lot of people have been asking for, and that is in the form of crossplay. So Todd Howard was asked in this interview, Fallout 76 crossplay, have you looked into it? And Todd Howard says they keep looking into it, but the game wasn't designed that way from the beginning. But from us, the more important thing is cross progression over crossplay. We do separate them, though we'd love to have it all. It's something we're looking at, but because of how 76 was made from the beginning, it would be a technical lift. But they are looking at it. Though going forward in their future games, they will be mindful about it, especially about cross progression. When you pick up a game, no matter what screen you're on, you should be able to keep going with your character and what you're doing. Starfield, of course, does that really well. You know what's funny? I think it was a month or so ago, Phil Spencer himself, the head of Xbox, said publicly in an interview that Fallout 76 should have crossplay. It should absolutely have crossplay. And I agree with you, Phil. I absolutely agree. It probably should have been added to the game a while back. I understand that it wasn't made that way. It wasn't designed that way. Yes, hindsight being 2020, they could have done that with a bit more foresight when actually making the game. However, now is a better time than ever. They should bring crossplay to the game because we know the hype around Fallout is going to slowly decline after the TV show. Weeks and months go on. Maybe when season 2 comes around, it's going to pick up again, right? But as players drop off, as the hype around the Fallout TV show and the franchise starts to die out, it will be really beneficial for people playing 76 to be able to play with those on PC and Xbox and PlayStation together, right? No matter what your platform, you should be able to play with others on other platforms because so many games do that nowadays. A big example is Helldivers 2. On PS5, I can play with people on PC if I want to. 76 should do that because it is going to get to a stage, right, where not many people are playing on PC versus Xbox versus PlayStation, so it's much better to just open the floodgates and let everybody play with everyone else. Especially because I keep hearing from people playing 76 that I've invested so much time in my character on PlayStation or Xbox or PC, and I want to play with my friends on another platform, but I don't necessarily want to start a new character, right? There should be a way of transferring your character at least, or doing crossplay. So maybe, cross progression does help in that regard. If you play on PlayStation 5, maybe you should be able to migrate your character over to PC or over to Xbox if you want to. But I think crossplay just makes it easier. So Todd, the team, get onto it. After Skyline Valley, get onto crossplay. I think that would be a great addition to the game, but Todd knows that as well. So moving on, Todd is asked about Starfield again and the new creation kit, and Todd says yes, they've delivered the creation kit and the new modding tools to some people, i.e. to modders and creators that work on Starfield, and we're going to hear more information about that soon. They don't have a date to announce, but it is important to us. And then he goes on to say how important modders are to them, and he wants to see them go pro and all that kind of stuff. So yes, Starfield is going to be getting modding tools, hopefully sometime this year, and they have already delivered them to some modders and some creators, and they're going to be under NDA obviously, so we probably won't be hearing anything in that regard. But this is good. It's good to see Todd and the team doing this because it allows modders to give them feedback on the tools. Hey, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. So hopefully once it's out in the open, other modders are able to use those modding tools with much less difficulty, and that's just going to lead to better mods. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I'm very excited for what the future of modding could be like with Starfield, especially when it comes to all the planets that, yes, a lot of them are procedurally generated, right? I want to see modders just take your planet and create an entire storyline or a full working planet of just different settlements and quest lines and talking NPCs and all that kind of stuff. The game has so much potential, it really does, and modding tools are just going to allow it to reach that potential. So hopefully we know more sometime soon. And then he's asked again about Bethesda and Obsidian. It's always a tricky topic when it comes to Todd Howard, but he's asked, with Bethesda and Obsidian being under the same umbrella, has that opened up opportunities for collaborations on things like Fallout New Vegas? And Todd Howard says, look, Obsidian did an amazing job with New Vegas, and that's also a game we published, right? And I think he's hinting there that of course they wanted to see it succeed as well, because they were going to make money from it, right? And then he even says that the head of Obsidian, Fergus, who runs the company, is one of Todd's favorite people in the industry. He's seen it all and he's done a fantastic job. But then Todd does say he can't speak to the things that they're doing in the future with the franchise, but New Vegas is an important game to us. We think they did an incredible job, and if anything, the Fallout show is actually leaning into the events of Fallout New Vegas. And then he talks about some interesting things with season 2 of the TV show. So he says season 2 is obviously going to feature some of New Vegas, but they're careful about maintaining the key events of that game and the great content in it. It's difficult when you're going back to an area where a game had multiple endings. They have some answers there, but it's hard. It's hard to canonize and say this is exactly how the game ended. Whenever we can, we'd like to avoid it. Don't refute anything that happened. Be careful about when you're specific about what happened. We want the game and what players did to be their reality and true. So yeah, Todd and the showrunners at Kilter Films do have some challenges ahead when it comes to dealing with New Vegas and the Fallout franchise. New Vegas had so many bloody endings. I talked about this recently when it just came to Mr. House, right? Mr. House died in most endings, and if you want to bring him back, with season 2 of the Fallout TV show, to some extent, you might have to canonize just the Mr. House ending, right? If you want that character to come back for the show. That's just one example about how tough it might be. And in my opinion, and I think the showrunners actually talked about this recently, I don't think they necessarily have to pick one ending and that's it. And you say, that's canon, that's exactly what we're doing. Because I think there are good things with different parts of the endings of Fallout New Vegas. And wasn't that the point of New Vegas? Like, what you did affected how exactly the game ended. Why shouldn't the showrunners be allowed to pick and choose from all the potential endings of New Vegas and say, hey, this is what we're going forward with, so long as it remains consistent with a potential ending of New Vegas? In my opinion, it doesn't necessarily need to fall in line with just one ending, with just a Mr. House ending, or with just the NCR ending, or the independent ending, or whatever it might be. I think they should have the ability to pick and choose, but I understand what Todd is saying when it comes to not canonizing things. If they can just avoid the topic, it's easier to avoid it because it's going to create less conflict, less confusion. And yeah, it makes you feel that your playthrough in New Vegas might actually have, the potential of actually being canon in the Fallout franchise. So I like what he said there, but I think they should be allowed to pick and choose. And all I want is Mr. House to be alive. And then moving on, he's asked if he's ever looked at Fallout being done or set in places other than the US, like Canada or Europe, for instance. And Todd says, part of the Fallout shtick is the Americana naivete, and part of that. For us, it's okay to acknowledge other areas, but our plans are predominantly to keep it in the US. It's okay to leave mystery. You can ask what's happening in Europe, etc. That's a good thing. The worst thing you can do is to have a mysterious land and remove the mystery. So I just want Fallout to stay in the US, right? Fallout and BGS have had too many controversies recently. Could you imagine if a Fallout game isn't based in the US and it's in Canada or China or Russia? The outcry on the internet would be absolutely insane. Just stay in the US. I'm happy with that. That's Fallout to us. Again, it's the Americana, 1940s, 50s vibe, the naivete, the patriotism. I want that to be Fallout. That feels like Fallout to me. Maybe in a DLC, you go to an area like Canada. Maybe you go to other areas and expansions and whatnot. But when it comes to the core crux of the main game, let that be the US, so there's not another bloody controversy that we need to talk about on this channel. And then finally, he's again asked about mod support for Starfield, specifically though for console, and he confirms absolutely 100% it's a huge thing that we did with Fallout and Skyrim, and it's important for us to bring to Starfield. So yes, Starfield is also going to be getting console mods sometime soon, which is good to see. It's good to see confirmed. So let me know what you think about what Todd said in this interview in the comments below. I'm so bloody tired. I'm so sorry if I babbled through this video, but I need to get it done and out of the door. And until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.